Hello, everybody, and welcome to Future Nonprofit, the podcast and YouTube channel where we talk with nonprofit practitioners and industry experts about how to build and scale the nonprofit of tomorrow. I'm Ted Vaughn, partner at Historic and host of Future Nonprofit. And on today's episode, we talk with Michael McDonald, the Chief Strategic Relationships Officer for the Bible Project. This is a fantastic episode, and so many more like them are available wherever podcasts are available. So join me as we unpack the lessons and stories of today's most innovative and impactful leaders. Michael, great to have you. Thank you so much for the time and for being a part of this. You're a leader that we respect, and you're working with a brand we respect and would love to see continue to grow and innovate and add value to our world. But we're going to kick off with just a few quick icebreakers because we want to know about you as much as we do your work and your thoughts and where things are going in the future. So you and I share a restaurant industry background, right?
Yeah.
I'm a huge fan of food and beverage. I'm a huge fan of all forms of alcohol. You know,
Equal
you have to be
opportunity.
Careful. You don't often lead with that. Just depends on the audience. But with you, I feel like I can. I feel safe. What are some of the most helpful lessons or dynamics that have shaped you and your leadership from that you can trace back to the restaurant business and the time working in that space?
I honestly, I'd probably reference the stuff that I learned from the restaurants almost every day. Like there are a lot of carryover. One, obviously there are new problems every single day. So there's new stuff that gets thrown at you. You can't just come in and know the exact, thing that's going to come up. So you're constantly problem solving. You're often dealing with, for the restaurants that I was at, it's a lot of staff. It was close to 100 folks working every day in this restaurant. And so between the kitchen, the bar, the front of house, and it's a dance. And you have to learn how to communicate in these different spheres. Otherwise, there's back of house tension with front of house tension and bar, like all the things that kind of come with that. So I feel like I got a class in just navigating conflicts, navigating communication styles, navigating understanding both sides of the situation. Yes, I mean, those from selecting good people, the restaurant industry, unfortunately, often has a pretty big revolving door. And so there's a lot of in and out and a lot of training. And you start adding up the money that you spend on training to get people at a place where they're ready. The restaurant I was a part of, we only hired people without experience because we wanted to actually train them up in our own culture and our own way of doing things. And that meant more investment up front to kind of get them ready for that. But it also meant we really didn't want to lose them after 3 months or 6 months because that's just going to be a huge money pit. And so we had to get really good at selecting the right people, communicating our vision up front. And so I think any business, if you can learn how to communicate, like what's your mission, what's your vision, why do you do things, down to every single level, like the newest hire, the person in the dish area, which we called the recruit on purpose, but like I had to do a week in recruit. Every single employee that ever worked at my restaurant had to work in the dish area for a week. And just all those kind of lessons that you just end up learning. And so now, in the business that I'm part of now, whether you're a brand new hire, whether you're a person, doing development on an app or language, localization, we want every single person to understand the why, the vision, the mission, the values that we have, and we do that from the very ground up. And I learned that definitely from the restaurant because otherwise people just come in and they think, I'm here to serve tables, make my tips, and get out of here. And that isn't going to differentiate you from every other restaurant that's out there. And people have a lot of choice and a lot of different places they can spend their money. And so we always wanted to kind of be that place that my worst server was better than the best server at the restaurant beside me. That was my goal. Yeah. And so yeah, I don't know. There's lots. I mean, gosh, I could probably go on and on.
That was a great answer. No. And honestly, we could do a whole podcast on that.
We probably could.
The first time I ever heard the term conflicting priorities, and it was like,
yeah,
right. Everything's a priority. Everything in this 2-minute window should be number one, but it can't be. So how do you navigate that, right? So many things I learned. Last icebreaker question. Do you identify more as a Canadian or as an American?
I definitely identify as a Canadian. I'm married to an American, so Auburn, War Eagle. I'm indoctrinated into the American side of things for sure. I am in the Pacific Northwest, which I feel like we adopt a little bit.
It's the suburbs of Canada.
Yeah, exactly. But no, when I go home, when I go back to Canada and just even step onto the ground and walk through the cities, I definitely feel closer to the ground. I don't know how to explain that, but there definitely is something there that I definitely feel and identify as a Canadian for sure.
One last quick question on Canada and America. We talk with a lot of clients who use the term pluralistic post-Christian to kind of summarize a direction that is where America is heading. Would you argue Canada is further down that road, or America?
I think Canada is further down that road from my own experience, although I'm not speaking from any sort of, church history authority. But from my own experience living in those cities, I would say we were probably closer to Europe than we were to America. I mean, that was a big thing coming down into America. And now, granted, I'm in Portland, Oregon, so we might be a little more...
You're the tip of the spear.
We might be the tip of the spear on that. But even then... it was wild walking into coffee shops and seeing people read their Bible and, people praying before meals. And I mean, that's just something I did not see pretty much anywhere in Canada. I did not grow up with that experience. Now, that said, I would say that the Jesus people that I knew in Canada, like, they're all in. Like, there's no in between because it's such a weird thing to be a part of in Canada, to go to church and to be a part of this community and everything else. So there's very few, from my experience, again, this is just Mike's opinion, folks that are in that, like, I'm a Christian, but I don't really buy into, like, I feel like I run into way more of those kind of people that would be like, I identify as a Christian, but I don't pray, I don't read, I don't engage, I don't go to church. It's almost like I'm a cultural Christian.
You can be that in America. It's tough to be that in Canada because the culture is removing. It's like trying to be that in Portland. There's just not much of that left. Maybe in the Willamette area, but
and they'll ask you, because if you do say like, "Oh, I'm a Christian," they're like, "Why?" And if you don't have a good, like, that's what the Canadians would be like. Why? Tell me about that. Like, I don't because. Stupid. Well, maybe not even that. They're very accepting, but it's just like they just want to understand. Like, well, why? What's the bent towards that? How did that happen for you? Like, they actually are very curious and not judgmental. There isn't as much baggage that I felt in that. But you definitely had to have an answer. Like, the whole, like, well, I was just born that. Like, that's just my family was that. Doesn't really fly as much.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Well, and just keep in mind as we move into kind of the meat and potatoes of the discussion, our audience is going to be largely people who are not in faith-based nonprofits and maybe don't relate to that personally. So I'm fascinated by these questions, and it was a great icebreaker. But I do want to say, we'll probably not double down on some of those dynamics with an assumption of the audience, because if we make assumptions about the audience, it's probably that they're not going to be resonating or looking for that out of this conversation. Is that fair?
That's and great. And I mean, I didn't grow up in the church, so this is I've kind of sat in both camps, and I've run nonprofits that are not faith-based, and I can definitely kind of talk through any of that stuff.
Love it. Well, this is going to be a great conversation, I can already tell, and I'm super excited to dive in. So I want to kind of, as a first official question, connect the dots for me from the restaurant business from Canada to nonprofits in the U.S. What was your journey, and what were some of the specific moments that brought you to where you are today? And kind of give me the bullet points on that.
Yeah, so I was doing restaurants, opening up restaurants up in Calgary, Edmonton. There was an opportunity to come down to the States. Wolfgang Puck was selling a chain of his called Kachina Kachina here in the Pacific Northwest, Seattle, Portland. And we had gotten to know Wolfgang through some other interactions.
Oh, nice.
And so he had kind of like, there was an opportunity to buy 8 restaurants for our company up in Canada, which is called Joey. And I moved down to Portland to be a part of that, kind of bringing the concept down to the States. My mentor and the president of the company, a guy named Lane, was moving to Seattle and asked if I would come down and be a part of that. And so new opportunity, new challenges, all that kind of stuff. So it was exciting. I came down, I did it for about 1.5 years. And during that time, some personal stuff happened. I was engaged, and that engagement broke off. That was painful and had me kind of thinking about, what am I doing? The restaurant was really actually hard. we're coming down into one thing, and this is interesting with the nonprofit and business side, but we did not just come down and change the name to Joey. We had a lot of things to learn about the American market. People often think that Canada and the US it's probably just the same. It's very different. Like right off the bat, for instance, our menu sizes were 75% of the American plates. So, we'd come down and try new dishes and people would complain that they were just too small and not enough food on them. So there's lots of stuff to learn. So we made the decision, let's learn as many things as we can under the Kachina brand so that we're not ruining our own brand while we're making all these learnings. So we came down and we started hiring new people, trying things underneath that brand so that any mistakes we made would be, because we're going to throw that brand out anyways. We're turning it to Joey's. So, but it was a difficult season for me as well. So I was going through that kind of tailspin, engagement break off. Restaurant was not fun. It was just a lot of work. And a buddy of mine, a guy named Don Miller, wanted to start a nonprofit called The Mentoring Project because he was writing a book about growing up without a dad. That was my story. I grew up without a dad. My dad left when I was 3. I had a really gnarly, abusive stepdad. It was part of even my faith journey of all of that. So anyways, Don's like, hey, I'm writing a book. I want to give a bunch of the proceeds to a nonprofit that's doing stuff with kids that are growing up without dads. And he was a good friend of mine. He's like, can you help me either find a nonprofit or if we can't find one, let's start one. And so we did. We started something called the Mentoring Project that was helping even the church talk about and work towards this stuff. So anyways, that's how I got into the nonprofit. I just helped start this nonprofit. I had the business background. I understood the way that, all of that works. I understood the way that, we can file for, articles of incorporation and get the nonprofits. That was easy stuff. And then we built this thing up and we ended up handing it off to a great guy who's running it now. But that was my entry from like the restaurant. It was like I had this restaurant experience, which was just business experience, really people experience, leadership experience, and moved that into this nonprofit space. And that kicked me off on a journey where then I started a number of other nonprofits and just kind of kept helping find ways to serve in the community.
So many parallels on our journeys. I love hearing it. I also love the humble flex of my friend Don Miller, who, maybe a few of our listeners have heard of. I'm assuming it's Story Brand, Donald Miller.
Yeah. That was pre-Story Brand. So this was like Blue Like Jazz had just come out. We had a small group together and we're doing life together. And then, this nonprofit. And then he kind of ended up going down this really cool like storyline and then Story Brand. And he's just brilliant in the way that he communicates. To me, that's his gift to the world, is taking complex ideas and simplifying them in a way that go, like, I think this is what we're trying to say. And so I think it's one of the reasons he's just so successful and still a dear friend for sure.
So today you're in a nonprofit called Bible Project. Just give us the really short thumbnail on what Bible Project attempts to do. What does success look like? What's your vision? And then I want to talk about innovation and leadership and all the different dynamics of that space you're in.
Yeah, so Bible Project is really an ed tech company. We started as an animation studio that was making explainer videos about the Bible. So similar to even like Story Brand stuff, thinking like taking complex ideas, making them simple and digestible, and then communicating those in a way that people can understand. And so our aim is to help people experience the Bible as a unified story that leads to Jesus. That's our mission statement. We've got values, obviously, inside of that. And we're making things for people that if you want to read the Bible, and if you don't, that's cool. If you do, though, and you want to understand it, we just want to help you do that. And it was a mashup of two really good friends, John and Tim, John Collins, Tim Mackey. Tim was, they both went to school together early on in college. And then after school, they kind of went their separate ways. Tim went like full Bible nerd route and just, got his master's and then his doctorate, et cetera. And Tim went business route and ended up going into what we now call explainer videos. And John actually made like some of the very first explainer videos that we can even think of. Like he would do it for Google and Apple and these different tech companies, taking complex tech ideas, asking the right questions, and then being able to figure out how can I write a script and do some, illustration animations to help clarify an idea. And so that was the whole thing. And then the idea was well, why don't we take Tim's brilliant Bible knowledge and John's incredible explainer knowledge and start doing that when it comes to the Bible, because it's a complex book. And so that's us. Yeah, we're just out there trying to help people.
And I would imagine raising money for something like this, you're appealing to a pretty niche audience who resonate with these values or who would want to fuel this mission. What does fundraising look like? Has it been easy? Have you had a lot of success? Have you had to innovate or think in new ways, especially in this post-pandemic time? What's your current approach to fundraising?
It's interesting, and I wish we could say that this was just like a brilliant idea that we thought of and it worked in that sense. Both John and Tim had other jobs. Tim was a pastor. John was running a big studio here in Portland doing this kind of stuff for tech companies. And so this was really just like a passion project of theirs in the beginning, and it was, let's just make a video a year, 2 videos, I don't know, however many we can make. They made the first few just through a few friends that kind of gave to make it happen. And then threw them up on the internet, threw them up on YouTube and just said, hey, listen, if these are helpful, then throw some money in the hat, like $5, $10, whatever you want, and we'll make more. And the moment we have enough to make another video, we'll make one. If that takes 3 months, 6 months, 10 months, however long, it was never this like, let's start this nonprofit and create this engine. It was really, we have something that we're passionate about, we think others are gonna be excited about, and let's just keep the speed of the crowd. And so before Patreon was a thing, we basically made our own Patreon. We built our own ecosystem app on our website to basically say, hey, $5, $10, whatever you want. They were always gonna be free. So unlike Patreon, like you didn't need to pay to see it. They were always gonna be free. We put them up on YouTube. But we always just kind of said, hey, join Bible Project. So we don't really do fundraising. We've never done a gala. We've never done an ask.
Really?
Other than, never once.
Never done a gala, never done traditional classic nonprofit kinds
Never.
It's all been this crowdsourced, crowdfunded.
100% crowdfunded.
And it will continue to be that.
Yeah, that's the model. I mean, we've never asked for anything. I mean, it's like, we do have some foundations, etc. But donors. Even those, we've never gone to a foundation and asked for money. It's only ever been the foundation has said, hey, we like what you're doing, could we help in some way? And then we reply and say, well, here's what we're working on. If you want to be a part of any of those, go for it. But we've never actually gone out and sourced out a grant unless they've approached us first, unless it's some sort of relational type thing. So yeah, all the traditional fundraising stuff, none of that we've done. I don't know if we thought it was going to be successful or not. It's just the way we started. And we love it because we feel like it's the crowd that has made this all happen.
We talk a lot about building communities and how nonprofits need to move away from the transaction into the sense of partnership and investment, recognizing people and being radically personal in the connection with the nonprofit and the nonprofit to the donor. It seems like your model of fundraising does that naturally, but how do you keep a sense of community and help people feel like they're invested beyond just their $20 or their, what does that look like? How do you cultivate that in order to kind of keep people engaged or feeling like they're a part of something bigger than just a video they gave you $5 for?
Well, a couple ways. One, we don't call them donors, we call them patrons. And so very similar to like the patron artists of, the Renaissance area. It was like people funded the artists to make work that then bettered the community. And so that's just even from our title of the way that we call people, like they're patrons, which means they're like a part of it. Two, we don't have a donor care, relationship team. We have a hospitality team, and our hospitality team is about caring for our patrons. And that means interacting. We are in constant communication. We get hundreds of emails every day, and we're responding to all of those personally. We're not just doing, one-offs. I probably send 100 video messages a day to different patrons and people that are commenting in, and I just do them on my iPhone, and they're like 1 minute, and I send them off.
Let's flag that. 100 video messages a day to people who are patrons and partners.
Patrons, strategic relationships, friends, like people
awesome.
that are engaging with it, writing comments, whatever. But it's like an hour and a half a day. It's not that, when you think about like what these people are doing and a part of, it's really not a massive investment. But it means something because we're connected in that way. We obviously engage in social media and all of those things. We also have just a bunch of ways that we constantly are trying to serve our patrons. We've given our coffee table books, these ginormous, like, they're basically coffee tables. Like, I feel like we should ship them with legs because they're so big. But we've sent those to people that have been faithful in just giving month to month, for a certain amount of time. We're constantly just trying to find ways that we can celebrate our patrons because it really is their project.
So you have a background in hospitality. And now you're working for a pretty big nonprofit that has a hospitality team instead of classic donor relations.
Yeah.
Any connection there? Is there
100%. Oh, yeah, no. Our CEO, Steve Atkinson, and I talk about this quite a bit because we've both been in service industries before. But like my favorite book is Setting the Table. It's an old
such a great book,
but it's still a classic. I still have my team read Setting the Table because I feel like this is, it doesn't matter what industry you're in, but especially in the nonprofit industry, like how do we just, care for these people, not just the people we're serving, but the people that are actually allowing us to go and do this.
Okay, so hospitality has played a huge role in how you understand. And just for scope and scale, how big of a budget are we talking about that this crowdsourced hospitality mindset's funding?
Yeah, it's this year it'll be about $25 million.
So not a small number.
It's not a small number. It's not a small team. It's a team of about 140 folks here in the U.S. We've got a handful of folks overseas as well, contractors and so on. There's a lot. I mean, there's an app and there's a lot of things that are going on. But yeah, it's not a small nonprofit and it's 100%. What's unique too that I would say is that I think I'd have to check the numbers, but the last time I checked, it was about 80% of our funding came from those patrons that are $50 or less.
That's
not the other way
amazing.
around. And it's often, if you've worked in and I've worked in nonprofit, it's usually the other way around. You've got about 20% of your folks that fund the majority of your work, and then you've got some smaller, type giving.
What's the average age in that scope?
I think it's somewhere between like 18 and 35, but I think there's more. Some of the larger donors are obviously larger, and I'd have to check. And they don't make, I mean, it's 20% still a significant amount. We have some amazing patrons that are giving, quite a bit more. But what's wild is during the pandemic and during times when you see the stock market go down, or when again, I've been a part of nonprofits where it's like, 2008 happened and you lose 50% of your funding because they're just like, I don't know if we're going to be able to give $1 million this year. But when you're talking $20, $30, $40 a month in reoccurring giving, those people aren't just like bouncing because the stock market hit. They might not even be in the market, so it doesn't even impact them.
So you've got $25 million budget. 80% of that is being given by a young millennial age giving small gifts that can scale up if you compel them to. What if somebody said, I want Bible Project to be at 50 million? Would you need to shift into more of a major donor mindset, or would you just keep doing what you're doing?
We would keep doing what we're doing. I mean, so couple things. One, we have been in positions in the past, I would say even 2 years ago, where if somebody said, hey, I've got a check for 10 million, I want to give it to you, we would say, no, we're good. Like, hold off. Like, here's a couple other, we're just not ready to use that in a way that would make sense. We now definitely are. We've made some changes in kind of when it comes to just technology and the app and where we're going in the future and some R&D stuff. There's some exciting things that if somebody said, hey, I got a check for 10 million, could you use it? I'd be like, yep. And here's how we'll use it. Here's exactly what we'll do with it. Like, here's kind of the outcomes. But we just weren't out of space necessarily. So yeah, there's been lots of times we've said no to funds to come in. We didn't really see the need at that point to do it. But I would say now, like, if we could be a $50 million organization, we got lots of dreams and lots of ways to kind of get into that. But we're also not charging after that. It's not like, let's be a 50 million. It's just, let's do what we're doing. If it continues to be helpful, then people will continue to support it and we'll keep doing more stuff. Like, that's it. And if people stop giving to it, we'll do something new.
Let's shift the conversation towards innovation and change, right? We're in a rapidly disrupted world that is moving faster than ever, and there are shifts happening at all sorts of geopolitical, meet cultural, meet trending, meet, it's wacky, right? How do you as a nonprofit innovate? Because often nonprofits struggle with change, struggle with finding the mindset or the capacity to take risks and fail. What does that look like for you and for the work that y'all are doing?
There definitely is shifts that happen as you grow. All of a sudden, you're talking 140 staff, and you're talking, if we make big risks and it doesn't work out, are we now like kicking people to the like? There is definitely more pressure for folks as things grow. That said, we definitely try to still keep some jet ski type movements, and so I kind of use the analogy like you've got the cruise ship, and I think that is our explainer videos and our podcast. Like it's going a direction, and we know what we're doing. If people stop giving to that, we'll maybe change course, but for now it's kind of like it's on its trajectory. And then we've got these little jet skis off the side that are like R&D type things that we're like, let's go try this. And if we get a bunch of traction, then we'll run with it. You know, for me in strategic relationships, Bob Goff and I have done these things called Dream Big. And we would take people through these kind of like helping them get unstuck with their big ideas. And one of the analogies we use is like those ponies that you see, if you ever go to the fair and you see like the 8 ponies and you got the little water gun and you're squirting, and at one point one pony is like way ahead, but like somebody, if they nail it, like all of a sudden this one's like way over here. Our thing is like have 8 ponies in the race and then just pick the fastest pony to be on, and if it changes, jump onto the other one. So for strategic relationships, I got 8 lines in the water, and I don't know if any of them are gonna go, and one might be moving a little faster right now, so I'm putting more energy into it. But if like another one takes off, I'm going to invest there. And so we've got a bunch of those jet skis and we got the cruise ship. So we are innovating. And I would say we also use our team. Like it's not just John and Tim and Steve and myself coming up with ideas and having the team execute it. We've got a lot of incredibly talented, way more brilliant than me, way more brilliant than, you know, any of us that are coming up with like, hey, here's what we're seeing. Here's what we want to work on. A lot of the animation styles have come up from the animation teams where we've been like, hey, what do you want to work? What do you want to grow in? Like what type of animation? And they're like, you know, it would be really cool. What if we did this? So I think listening to the team, having a really good dynamic that's not just top down. Our org chart's flipped upside down. So we actually have the CEO at the bottom and then kind of the C-suite folks next. And then it kind of goes up. And we know that's just like, that's a visual, but it's a visual to share. Like our job is to serve the team and be hospitable to that team, and that team ends up becoming incredible at coming up with a lot of these innovative ideas. And so I don't know, just not being in a silo. We've got a lot of folks that are coming up with some great stuff, and then we just got to give space to try things out. And if it gets traction, then we'll do more of it. Just like our videos. Listen, if nobody gave $5 in the hat and they got no views on YouTube, we'd all be doing other things, and that wouldn't be bad. It would just say the market isn't looking for this. I think too often, especially in the nonprofit space, and I've been in these where you create something, it has some success, and then it starts to slow down, and then you start clamoring for it to be what it used to be. And what it used to be just might not be what the world needs right now. Is that a possibility? And so let's just do something else. Like, let's see, you know, anyways, that's where we're at. I think if for some reason funding stopped tomorrow, we'd stop making explainer videos because it would show that the world doesn't care about explainer videos anymore. And we'd be okay with that. And we'd either go do something else or we'd find out what the world is looking for.
Given the incredible role video plays and the increasing role video plays and all the trends and shifts that happen in how you consume video and the edits and the what does innovation look like in terms of the very product or service that you're providing?
One example I would say, like innovation-wise, where we think things are going and could go is like the Google Maps analogy. Like me and you are old enough to remember like driving down the road with a paper map, and it kind of is crazy nowadays to think. Like it's like out on the dashboard, you got the steering wheel, you're trying not to miss your turn, and then all of a sudden like Google Maps came out, or like MapQuest even was like the next thing. And it could actually like do your where you need to go, and you'd hit print, and then you would at least just have like one sheet that was a normal, not obnoxious size to get you to where you're going. Then Google Maps happens, the smartphone happens, and now when you look at maps, it is like the most interactive experience. It's not just a paper map in digital form. It is like 3D buildings and Yelp is connected to it, and what am I eating, and reviews,
and you can personalize it. Set filters, the angle, 3D. Do you want to see traffic? Toll roads,
all of that. It's this incredibly immersive flybys. Like you can go into San Francisco and it just does this whole fly. So what we think is next, at least in our space, and we're in the kind of Bible space, and so that's what I'm going to talk about. But we do think that what's the next stage for Bible when it comes to the digital world? Because right now what we have is like MapQuest. We basically have a analog product in digital form with maybe a couple little bells and whistles. Like that's it. And we think there's a space in the future for the Google Maps of the Bible. And what would it look like to create that, where when you're not just, you're engaging with the text, but with all of the like 3D and video and audio and, whatever, explain, like all the things that you could possibly see. So now that's probably 5 years out, but you've got to start thinking about it now, and start
Right.
working on it and R&Ding it now, because 5 years will be here before you know it.
And it sounds like your organizational culture is built on this idea of may the best idea win versus the command and control. I'm the CEO, or I'm the chief creative, or I'm the chief whatever, and your job's to execute my ideas, right? It sounds like you cultivate great ideas from your team. Is that a fair statement?
I would say, yeah, I think that whole, I mean, and from other people. I mean, I think that Google Maps analogy came from somebody not even on our I can't remember, somebody from not on our team. And yeah, we're constantly learning from other folks. There's a guy that we hired as our chief product officer who, told us, guys, like what you do with the Bible is like a magic trick. I will watch one of the videos and be like, oh my gosh, I can't believe they got all of that out of this book. But when I go to read the Bible, I can't do what you do. So I need you to keep performing the trick, otherwise I'm lost. And that got us to a place to go, wow, we really need to teach people how to do the trick, whatever that is, like in that analogy.
Really good.
And so now we're starting to think, okay, what does it look like to actually not just show them a video to explain something, but how do we actually get to a place to understand the paradigm that we actually approach this with? And that's a whole other type of learning and study and trying to figure out how do we, so we're innovating a lot from our team, from outside of our team, constantly growing. And again, most of it's just to serve. We've got a mission. We want to accomplish that, and we just can't lose sight of that.
I want to talk about your role and the importance of relationships and partnerships, because you have a model that is very crowdsourced and is very decentralized and is working well, and you're sending 100 video messages a day to people. And at the same time, you've got a strategic partnership, strategic relationship hat that you have to wear.
Yeah.
In your model, in your world of crowdsourced funding being responsible for 80% of your $25 million budget, what does strategic relationship or strategic partnership even mean or look like to you?
Yeah, so we did, I mean, that word strategic relationships was purposeful. We decided not to go with the word partnership because partnership can mean a lot of things. Partnership can mean like we're in cahoots, we're connected. And when you, again, I'm in the Bible space, so this depends on what market you're in. But in our space, like there's a lot of opinions all over the place. And so if I have a strategic partnership with one person, it means a bunch of things. Like it means like I believe this, I am teaching this. So we had to kind of go, we're not going to be partners with anybody. We'll be in relationship with lots of people, because being in relationship doesn't mean that I have to agree with everything you say and you have to agree with everything I say. But often partnership does mean like we're pretty linked with the same things. And so for us, that was strategic. That was specific. The other thing that's helpful for us is that, man, we give it away for free. So it's like the easiest open source, like there's no exchange. It doesn't have to be, for me, I'm not coming to you going like, hey, I've got a product and I need emails and I need more funding and I need, I get to come to you and go, Ted, what's your pain point for your organization? Where are you at? And obviously, again, we're in the Bible space, but I get to talk to people that are in that space and go, what do you care about? What's your pain point? What's your hope? And then I get to provide a resource that's free for them to go, great, figure out how to use this inside your ecosystem. And I can help you because I've worked with a lot of other folks in that ecosystem, but it's the best job in the world, Ted. It's so easy because I get to just serve people with the content. Now, that can sometimes be too big of a blank canvas. So you actually have to help kind of create some guardrails. But yeah, so it's incredibly important. I mean, my whole day is made up from just these kind of, whether it's these kind of calls or other calls with other folks. And I'll take calls from a church of 50 people to a church of 50,000. It doesn't matter to me because it's all a part of the mission for us. And thankfully, as we've grown in size, we haven't lost sight of. And again, I learned that from Bob too. Bob would go and speak at Catalyst in front of 10,000 people, but he'd also go to speak to the kindergarten class of like 30. And one of them he was getting paid for, and one of them he wasn't. But he basically just said yes to if they're willing to have an ear and let me share, then who am I to decide not to go to the person of the 30 kindergarten kids? So I try to just be open and available to as many people as possible.
We're big fans at our agency of design thinking principles, and I can tell you're familiar.
Yep.
The core driver of design thinking is empathy for the end user, thinking about the person who's ultimately at the end of this service or product and understanding who they are, what they need, what they value, how they perceive themselves, and how our thing can add value to them.
Yeah.
What do you do to increase your knowledge or empathy for your end user? And who is that end user in your mind?
Yeah, it's a great question. It's a little unfair for me, for most nonprofits, because for the most part, so let's say I started a nonprofit helping refugees get resettled here into the States. I am not the end user in that. It's a refugee family coming in from Afghanistan. With the Bible Project, though, like, I am the end user. And you are, if you want to read the Bible, then you're the end user. And that's who we're making them for anyway. So there's not even like a sell. Like, if you don't want to read the Bible, we're not trying to go like, well, you really should. Like, there's none of that. It's just, if you want to read the Bible and you want to understand it better, then we have things that'll help you. And that's me. Like, that's all, anybody that is in that space. And so what's a little bit unfair is like, I know the end user because I'm the end user. I feel like they're making the videos for me. Every time we launch a new video, I'm not watching it because I'm like, yay, we did a launch. I'm watching because I'm like, oh, this is going to help me understand Genesis, or this is going to help me understand whatever.
So you're not going after cynics and skeptics trying to move them closer to being open or curious or interested. You're truly serving people who are already there to some degree.
Yeah, and not that there aren't cynics that are watching our stuff and we love engaging with them, but we're definitely not targeting going like, that's our mission. No, our mission is just to help people experience the Bible as unified story leads to Jesus, period. It's very simple. That's our mission. So we're not necessarily targeting a whole bunch of people outside of that space, and we're not trying to convince anybody of anything. We're just going like, if you're interested, here you go. Whenever I'm talking to other nonprofits, because I've also been in the space though where it's like, I've got to raise funds to do this, rescue kids out of sex trafficking in Thailand that Jimmy is never going to meet or see or ever experience. So I've got to somehow appeal in that kind of sensationalist aspect to get money from you to go do this job over here. With Bible Project, it's like, I'm giving some funds and I'm totally receiving a rad product and getting to continue to, engage. So listen, it's unfair. I totally get it.
It's awesome though, because and let's bridge between what you're doing with Bible Project and the idea of crowdsourced fundraising for other nonprofits. What would you say you've learned that would be applicable to a nonprofit that is hypothetically the refugee, or dealing with poverty, or even arts and theater? What's been kind of the nugget around crowdsourced fundraising that you think applies beyond the model of Bible Project?
Yeah, I've definitely helped a number of other projects since then. It definitely helped, and they've seen a lot of success in the crowdfunding model. But you do have to change the way that you engage your crowd. It does have to be a community. You have to invite them into the process. You have to invite them into not just the storytelling on Instagram, but like the actual you've got to invite them into this community. You've got to listen to them. You've got to engage. That's one. I think also finding ways to help them engage wherever they're at. So for instance, one thing with if I'm going to be giving towards human trafficking prevention and rescue and everything else in Thailand, I should be doing stuff here in Portland around that space. Bob and I were helping out with some refugee camps up in northern Iraq during the whole ISIS scenario. And people were giving to that. But we are then also saying we've got a lot of refugees here in Portland. What would it look like to actually step into their lives? Lots of Afghan refugees and Iraqi refugees and Kurdish refugees. And so all of a sudden we started seeing people actually getting into those relationships here, and then it continued to filter growth in the global aspect as well. And so I think it's engagement. I think it's relationship. I think it's, community. And I know those are all just buzzwords, but I think it's super important, especially in the crowdfunding side of things.
It's such a great message. It's so important, and it's a critical theme that I think resonates across those that are listening to this. But I want to ask about best practices, because like you said, it's one thing to say we're all about community and you send video messages out, but it's easy to blast content out. Well, not easy. I mean, 100.
Yeah, sure.
But it's a one-way communication. What are best practices? What are techniques you've found to actually receive the voice of your community, to give them a platform or a way to share their thoughts or give their feedback?
Yeah, I mean, again, I wish we had just planned this, but YouTube for us, because we were on YouTube, that was our platform. For the longest time, we didn't even have a website. I mean, we had a website, but it was just YouTube. It was just point people to YouTube. YouTube was our channel. And what's great about YouTube is that there's a huge comments and engagement section right there that we could engage right away with our audience. We didn't need their emails. We didn't need them giving. We didn't need them sending us stuff. They might have just been posting, but we would engage really heavily on that space. Same thing on social, whether it's Instagram or Facebook or whatever. Like, we're not going to like let just comments just fly by. We're going to engage. We're going to be present. We're going to be there. So that was one way. I'm very open with my email. Like, I'll give it to anybody. I'll put it, just like, hey, send me, if you've ever got a question, if you've got a concern, if you ever see something that you're like, that didn't hit me, like whatever it is, my door is open. And most of our team is like that as well. So having a very open door policy was important for that. And then actually getting back to emails in a timely fashion. I know this just feels like it's such a, I don't know if it's a millennial, I don't know what it is, but we got a thing like if a patron or even just anybody is emailing us with a question or a thought, like we want, even if we don't have the response, we want to respond within that day, like 48 hours at the worst. But like the hope is like by the end of the day, we're kind of at least going, hey, great question. Let me get back to you. Even if that's what it is, just that they know that they're heard, they're in it. So we just want it to feel more like a relationship and less like a transaction. And a transaction is a blanket email that goes out, thanks for the email, whatever. But a relationship, I would never do that for my uncle. I would never do that for my mom. I'd never do that, Yeah. And so we want to try not to do that in this space as well.
Michael, we talk a lot in our book, Culture Built My Brand, about having principles, things that are actionable and that really shape behavior within the organization so that what's one principle or one value or something that Bible Project has for its culture that yields that experience of community and relationship that you're wanting to happen with your group of people and partners and patrons?
I mean, so I'll tell you what our values are, and it'll probably speak to it. But our first value is generous. That's an easy one because we're giving away our stuff for free, but we want to be generous. So God's generous, and we have an abundance mindset, and so we don't kind of think about it in any other way, but just let's be generous. The second one is humble. Listen, we're not the oldest kid on the block. There's been people that have been doing this for a long time before us that have lifted up and allowed us to even be in this space. And so we constantly just feel like we're still the new kids, just a lot of learning. And that comes from John and Tim from the top, like from the bottom up. If you ever listen to Tim, I mean, he's one of the most brilliant Bible scholars on the planet, and yet he will talk to you like, hey, let's learn that together. It's like we're co-learners. It's like all of a sudden, which is wild. So humble, thoughtful is another one of we just want to be really thoughtful with wisdom around that kind of stuff. Creative. So these are unifying and then unhurried. So those are our values. So generous, humble, thoughtful, creative, unifying, and unhurried. And each of those, whenever we're trying a new thing, if we're going into a new product, if we're going into a new marketplace, if we're whatever it is, we are running it through that grid. Like, how are we being generous in this space? How are we being humble in this space? How are we being unifying? We believe that not only is the Bible a unified story, at least to Jesus, but we actually believe it's a unifying story. And so often in this space, again, and it's very divided. And so how are we being unified? And then unhurried, these are our own timelines. We don't want to be a startup for 30 years. And that's what it can feel like sometimes when you're like just constantly chasing after the next thing or the next dollar or the next growth. Is you can literally be, if you've ever taken a company public, it's a wild ride for those few years. But like if you do that for 10 years, you're just going to be burnt out and hate what you do, and it's just a job. And so for us, we're like, how do we instill an unhurried, not apathetic, but just an unhurried, like careful, God rested in his work, and we're going to find rest as well. So anyways, those are values. Everything goes through that.
Michael, this is so good. I feel like we need to have at least 2 or 3 more of these shows where we talk about the hospitality connection to the nonprofit space, and we can talk about what it means to build a crowdsourced model and so many things. So we need to do this again. But for the purpose of today's podcast, where can people stay in touch with you? Maybe you don't want people to stay in touch with you, but if you did,
totally get man. It's,
where do they go? How do they stay in touch with you?
Yeah, I mean, it's easy. So the website, BibleProject.com, but my email is mike@BibleProject.com. So that's about as easy as it gets. My cell number is available, 503-799-9231. You can always call. Again, I'm just an open book.
Bob Goff moment right there, giving out your cell phone.
It is, and man, I learned from him. I mean, I've traveled all over the world with him for, 20 years almost. So to watch him truly be available to people and how that moved the needle and be in some of those conversations has definitely been a forerunner for that. But absolutely, like, just stay in touch. If you've got questions, if you've got ideas, like, we're just again, we're open in all of that for sure. And as many conversations as you want to have about the other stuff I'm in, I could talk all day about the restaurant industry for sure, because it's a big part of how we do a lot of the stuff we do today.
For more stories from experts in the industry and to learn how to take your nonprofit into the future, like this video, subscribe to our channel and podcast, and visit makehistoric.com/insights. Thank you so much for listening. I'm Ted Vaughn, and this is Future Nonprofit.